God damn it, an entire generation pumping gas.
Waiting tables, slaves with white collars. Advertising has us chasing cars and clothes, working jobs we hate so we can buy shit we don't need.
One day felt like an entire week, and I'm not exaggerating. One day without food and without my phone. If you think about what your life is, it's basically a piece of pie, and the pie represents how much time you have each day. So a piece of the pie is taken up by hygiene, a piece of the pie is taken up by eating food, but a huge piece of the pie is taken up by your phone. Time is our quote-unquote most valuable asset. The other big thing that takes up a huge piece of the pie is food. Eating food and scrolling on my phone is actually pretty fun. The problem is that takes up 90% of the pie. So what's left to create the life that you want? A few hours? And so if we look at this graph here, and the dots I was talking about, look at how little free time we have. The average is 9 hours a day. That's just insane. So what I set out to do was to remove the two biggest pieces of the pie that are taken up, which is food and phone. And I wrote down every single thought I had. And I did this for 3 days. And I must say, what I thought of and what I wrote down was really profound. The irony of the whole situation is that I was calling this monk mode, but really all I was doing was living like humans used to, even just 20, 30 years ago.
When everyone's sick, it's not called a disease anymore.
So if you look at obesity, it's obviously a problem. You see obese people all the time. But back in the day, we had to go out and hunt
Stuff. We had to go out and get some. If we were hungry, we had to go out and earn it.
Now you can just take a metal box out of your pocket, you press a few buttons on a screen, and then the food magically appears at the doorstep of your air-conditioned cave of dopamine that you call your apartment. But
I like DoorDash. It's dangerous outside. I need to stay inside.
despite that one guy that says he splits his days in half and bends time, the sun's actually up in the sky for the same amount of time for all of us. So I'd argue that we all have the same amount of time. After all, those moments when you aren't working, cooking, sleeping, eating, cleaning yourself are really the moments that you actually create your reality. Let's talk about food. Every time we eat food, we undergo a constant just roller coaster of emotions, whether you realize it or not. There's the initial hunger that you notice once you get done scrolling on TikTok. Then you close TikTok because you got bored. And then you're like, ooh, Krispy Kreme sounds so good right now. And then you get up, you grab your keys, you drive 15 minutes just to go get a few 200-calorie balls of chemicals. And before you dig in, you take a picture and you send it to the group chat of your closest friends. The first bite you take is breathtaking. You almost just yell in delight.
Yummy.
And then 4 minutes later, you feel bloated. So being bloated, you tell yourself, I'm never doing this again. And then 3 days later, when your mind has some space to think, you repeat that cycle over and over and over again. So you can see how the phone and food are connected. They feed into each other rather effectively. But let me take you into my mind when I got rid of both of those things. First things first, there's a lot to be learned when you deprive yourself of the two greatest addictions that humans face. The first thing I learned was that we really only suffer in the resistance. As soon as the hunger set in around the 16-hour mark, I did feel hungry, but there was a sense of comfort in my commitment to the experiment, whereas on the flip side, during the other 362 days of the year when I'm not in quote-unquote
Modern monk mode.
I'd probably get to 16 hours without food and likely just scavenge in the pantry like I'm a starving gorilla. So the lesson here is really that the only discomfort is when you're 1 foot in and 1 foot out, but commitment is the way. And next I wrote a lot about the substantiality and the significance of food as an industry and as an activity in our society. Since I was so damn hungry, I saw how prevalent food was. So much so that I was about to say so much so that every time I saw an obese person, I would get hungry because I knew they were eating good. And as I was saying that, an obese person just walked by. But the point is that food is everywhere. And so think about how many excursions, as in when you go on vacation, they add all you can eat, and it just jacks up the value. So you can imagine, honey, there's a regular boat tour, Or should we do the one that's all you can eat and drink package? Guess which one they're choosing. And not just that, just consider how many times per day you make the
What am I gonna eat?
decision. And so to get back to the time pie analogy, I realized how big of a slice food was. What was really interesting, and probably the reason you actually clicked on the video, is what happens when you remove such a big piece of the pie. First of the effects is little to no unnecessary emotion. So it's not just I had no emotion. That's definitely not what was happening, but no unnecessary emotion. And so this is for many reasons, but for one, you're overall much less engrossed in that constant mental roller coaster of ups and downs that we typically experience when we're eating all the time. And you don't even think about it. But there's less decisions being made on food, and there's just more energy towards creativity. So when you remove stuff, life becomes so much different, and that includes extra emotional energy. So when you aren't eating, you might feel yourself not care about someone cutting you off in traffic, whereas normally you'd blow up, you'd flip them off, and then you'd complain to your wife about it over the phone. But when you're fasted, you can think, whatever, I really don't have the mental energy to give a fuck. And that right there is real growth. That's you realizing how unnecessary that common engagement really is. So it makes you aware that getting mad at someone in traffic does expend real energy. And that goes back to the lesson of acceptance. The clarity that I had was pretty much unmatched. And it's not so much that your mind feels sharp necessarily. In fact, you really don't have much energy at all otherwise. But do you ever notice when you get tired, you seem to think with less analysis? So for instance, back when I had a girlfriend, it was pretty routine for me to call her at night. I'm sure you guys out there are probably familiar with that. But as an early bird, I'd always conk out right at about 9:30 p.m. And what I distinctly remember was the more tired I got, the more goofy I was. So I do these hilarious accents of various personas. And the point is that comedy is something that requires intellect and clear thinking. So someone who's intentionally funny is not going to be simultaneously overanalyzing their thoughts. So as the body drifts into sleep, it really doesn't overthink. There's no energy to do that. You can't sleep and overthink at the same time. So although it's not identical, I think that's probably the best way I could describe the feeling of not eating food to someone who hasn't really gone 24 hours without it. But let me touch on the experience without my phone. First and foremost, books became my most prized possession. There's a quote that says, "When life is boring, work is fun." And I think the same principle really applies here. When you've got no food and no phone to basically waste your life away on, the simple stuff becomes fun again. I easily crushed A Happy Death by Albert Camus, or Camus, however you want to pronounce it, in literally 4 reading sessions. It's a short book, but the speed of completion is not something to skip over. It normally takes me about a week of reading 30 to 60 minutes per day to finish a book. So it became pretty obvious that I wasted a lot of mental capacity on stuff like Snapchat, TikTok, Grindr, and I was able to read at a much higher level. Next, all of my
Darkest thoughts came forward.
So I think alone time plus no food plus no phone had me thinking
Deeper than I ever had.
But it highlights that so many people are living on the surface. So you wake up, you wish you could go back to sleep, check your phone, see if anyone's texted you, probably not. Then you scroll social media while you check the clock with each scroll until your 9 a.m. obligation forces you to take the covers off and get ready. And then you basically go throughout your day looking forward to the weekend the entire time. And then finally, the weekend comes. You get drunk Friday and Saturday night, and then once Sunday rolls around, you just wish it was Friday again. And then you repeat this cycle, and it continues forever and ever. And as you can see, there's a lot of cycles that we undergo as humans. So the hypothetical human being that we're talking about here really remains avoidant of any discomforting realities that might come forward in that space from the mindless distraction that's our phone, overindulging in food, whatever. It's just distract forever and ever. And I know this because that was me in my youth. over the past year or so, it's just been a process of unlearning the general consensus that's bestowed upon us as children, which is you play sports in grade school, you go to college, then you find a wife in college, get your degree, then find a job, and then you repeat that cycle of going to work every day until you die. And I think beyond that, the more harmful of the programming that is installed into our youth brains is the one that makes us so reactive. So for example, teenagers are so hyper-focused on what other people think about them. In fact, their entire life and personality is created upon it, which is a very shaky foundation. It's the roller coaster of ups and downs. The idea that you go out and change the outer world to satisfy the inner one, which is your mind. That program has got to be
Uninstalled.
You're not going to change something in the outside world to leave a long-lasting impression on your inner world and your brain. That's just not how it works. Now, I think most critically, and what so many people are longing after, is to slow life down again. This could be an entire video in itself, but so many people get weird and sappy when they think about how quickly life's gone by. Or even when you zoom in a little bit and you examine it week to week or day to day, the same thing happens. So the most well-known example is the weekend.
It seems as though most humans are living for the weekend, and then as soon as it passes, they cling to it until Wednesday rolls around and the next weekend is closer than the previous one.
So nonetheless, both of these challenges, no phone, no food, they have this time warp effect. Do you remember when you were a kid and almost everything felt like a movie? That same feeling came back to me when I didn't have my phone or food. You don't really ever disconnect from that internet world when your phone is just away in your pocket. So it's the commitment theme that keeps coming back up. You only really receive the benefit of anything when you go full-fledged. So in this context, putting your phone across the room probably won't make your life feel ethereal. But committing publicly by telling all your friends you're going to go 3 days without food and no phone, it's a great way to lock yourself into it with an external commitment. But I gotta say, one day felt like an entire week. And I'm not exaggerating. One day without food and without my phone literally made it feel like it was an entire day in one. So if you're looking to maybe be in the moment again, try taking one of those. Maybe you skip a meal and you go hungry. You're not going through that up and down all the time. Or maybe you leave your phone at home and go have the experience raw, quote unquote. So to end this off, I want to talk about what I'm actually going to take going forward. Since this ended, I've literally just left my phone behind. I've seen my phone as almost poison, a necessary poison. And so I've got my own fitness coaching business, so there's certain things that I can't get away from, but I can pretty much use my computer for all of that stuff. Even messaging people I can do on there. I don't really need my phone. And so even when I go out, the phone has been staying behind, and it allows me to be more lucid, it allows me to be there. I don't have multiple streams of thought running while I'm at the grocery store. I'm actually just at the grocery store. So to put it simply, the phone has lowered itself to a necessary evil. Sure, I might need it sometimes, but for all the times that I feel my life's at risk and I really need to have the potential to call the cops, I can just leave my phone powered off in my pocket. So I'm not trying to sound like an extremist or a boomer, which I probably do, but for the sake of happiness, phones are just poisonous. They're cancerous. So something I'm pursuing is happiness. I think life will be a lot easier if I'm happy. As for food, I think everybody on the planet should try a 3-day fast. Just once. If you're new, maybe don't try the 3-day fast with the phone, no phone thing, but try the fast and the no phone challenge independently, maybe combine the two later. But they both are something you should experience. And the reason I say that is because everyone needs to realize how much control they actually have over their body. The mind is going to tell you that it's hungry way sooner than it actually needs to eat food. And that's something you can't be sure of until you just prove it to yourself. So I think you empower yourself a lot when you go 3 entire days without food. Or even 1 day, whatever it is. You got to prove to yourself that you're in control. And that'll lead you to have a lot of peace. A hunger craving is not the end of the world. But we're so blindly led by our hunger, and we're so blindly led by our phones, that I think it's a good objective to seek freedom from it.